got this thing working? Maybe. 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 Let's see. Maybe. 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 Let's see. Maybe. Maybe. Cool. Alright, so I am live. That's pretty cool. I got my phone working on live streaming. Look at that technology now. There's this guy behind me who's been blowing leaves for like literally an hour and a half. Came out here to enjoy the beautiful fall foliage, the beautiful fall scenery, and we got leaf blower guy in the back here for about an hour and a half. So if you hear that, I apologize. He literally just started as I got on this live stream. Let's see if we can catch him walking down the street here. This guy's neurotic right now. He's been doing this shit for like literally an hour and a half. How many leaves do you have on your front lawn? You hear this shit? I can't believe this right now. I'm not going to get off the live stream either because I was so determined to get it working, and it's working. Let's wait until he goes. I'll let a couple people get on anyways. We got a major announcement right now. That's why I want to wait until people could actually hear me. It's like one of those guys, like, you know some of those people, like, they got nothing to do. Well, not even that they have nothing to do. They're just so neurotic that they come outside and they just gotta sit on a leaf blower, right? Super long. So yeah, here we are. Today's date is October 22nd, 2020. This news update goes back to October 15th, 2020. But I just wanted to take the opportunity now to create a video on it. That a week's gone by and some other news has progressed. It's made it a little bit more juicy. But last Friday, the world was taken by storm when the IMF announced that they were calling for a new Bretton Woods-like style agreement and a change to the reserve currency, essentially the change of the dollar as the reserve currency of the world. Now, what is the IMF? The IMF is the International Monetary Fund. The way that banking works around the world is that every country almost, other than maybe about 4 or 5 right now, have central banks in them. The central banks are they're private banks in each country. They're not a part of the government. They're privately owned banks, and they lend the currency to the government. So in the United States, for example, the Federal Reserve Bank is a privately owned bank that has been allowed to create the US dollar, but they lend it to the US Treasury. They lend it to the US government. So when you hear that the US is in $27 trillion plus in debt, and people say, well, who is that debt to? Is it to China? Is it to Russia? Who's the debt to? No, the debt is actually to the Federal Reserve Bank. The debt is to these private bankers, central bank. So that's the mask in finance and economics. That's a 101 quick little breakdown for you. But the way that these banks, the way it's structured is you have the central banks for each country, and then those banks all get, they go up to the next level up from them is the IMF and the World Bank. Now the IMF acts as the World Bank. What is that, do you ask? The World Bank? It's exactly what it sounds like. After the last World War in 1944, there was, when the U.S. came out as a world power, the U.S. put in place the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, all these entities. And Bretton Woods was a famous moment because in 1944 they met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, all these world leaders, and they all said, okay, this is the way the system is going to run from now on. The US dollar is going to be the reserve currency. It's backed by gold. The UN's in place, the WTO's in place, and we're going to put in the IMF and the World Bank. And their job essentially is to control the world. I mean, like, if you want to talk about it just flat out, all central banks do. It's a centralized form of management. It's communism, really. I mean, it's socialism. It's one centralized entity controls the banking industry. So you can look at the IMF and the World Bank as the king to crop there of the problem with the world. But so what is Bretton Woods? Okay, so the World Bank is the top of the pyramid. That's how this works. So there's the IMF, the World Bank. They're the top of the pyramid. Then you have central banks all around the world in each country. They're the next in line in the pyramid. And then as you go down from there, you have investment banks and large banks like JP Morgan. And then from there you go down, and then you have like commercial banks, credit loans, or credit unions, smaller like residential banking. And then from there you go down, and then you get to like people like you and I down in business, and then in personal loans, auto loans, banking, stuff like that. So this is how the banking industry is structured. But for this conversation's sake, the important thing to talk about is, so the IMF is they're the leader in the world right now, and they're calling for a new Bretton Woods style agreement. So again, Bretton Woods, 1944, that was the moment that the US dollar was put in place as the reserve currency of the world. Now the IMF is saying we want to do that over again. We're calling for a new Bretton Woods style monetary reform. So they're calling for essentially the end of the US dollar as a reserve currency. Now this is something that I've talked about quite a bit. If you've been following my channel, if you've been subscribing to me, you would be prepared for this, and this would be at no surprise to you. We've been waiting for nation states for a while now to start creating their own digital currencies and trying to make people think that these are cryptocurrencies, quote unquote, but in fact they are centralized forms of what we have today, just in a new digital form. Except what these new central bank digital currencies and what the IMF will bring forward are a form of currency where, imagine if everything can be taxed at will. Every transaction that ever takes place can be taxed. Mass financial surveillance, totalitarian surveillance. Having the ability to restrict the flow or allow the flow of funds faster than ever before. So, whether or not that all happens, we shall see. But the IMF has made it very clear at this point that the U.S. dollar, in their mind at least, is on its way out. Now, what does that mean for Bitcoin in other cryptocurrencies? This means that the test is coming for, the test is not coming. Bitcoin is the truest form of money the world has seen. It is probably one of the last true forms of money, maybe even humans see. But this is a threat to governments now. This is a threat to nations. So the currency race is on. That's essentially what this means. They're calling for reform. This is a call to nations around the world that the currency race is on, and Bitcoin was the first. Bitcoin is the oldest. Bitcoin will last this test of time, but it's now, I think we see the actual currency race happen between countries trying to create their own currencies, their new currencies, and based on what countries win, How do you win this currency race? You become either the one nation to have your currency used the most by people around the world, or and this is the experiment. So if Bitcoin prevails as the one and only form of digital gold, these countries maybe don't create their own digital currencies, but instead are mining Bitcoin in the background as a reserve asset. Either way, time will tell. This is just one of the three pillars that we've been expecting. If you've been following my channel, again, I've talked about three forms of money that the world will see. The first form being, of course, money for the people, that being Bitcoin, truly decentralized cryptocurrencies that are not owned by one country, not owned by one person, not owned by one company. There'll be money for corporations, and we've already seen this with Facebook's Libra project, and also many other companies now coming up with their own digital currencies to take over in the financial service industry. But the last form of money we'll see is money for central banks and money for nation states. And this is the ultimate currency war that I think we see play out, is money for the people, money for corporations, money for nation states. Which of the three win? This is the experiment, folks. It's an incredible time to be alive. By the way, Andreas Antonopoulos is the one that dubbed those three pillars. Definitely give him a shout out. Give him a follow on YouTube. He's got some incredible content. Who I learned all my Bitcoin information from starting. Got his books, watched all his YouTube videos. Highly recommend it. But how can you stay informed going forward? Well, you can subscribe to my free email newsletter. I'm going to be pumping out a lot more content, a lot more live streams like this. Also, more tutorials and information. My goal is to get you caught up to the point where you're comfortable using Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. You understand it, you can get involved in the space, because I do feel like this industry is going to be one of the only ways to preserve your own financial sovereignty, but also your financial freedom and wealth preservation going forward. So definitely subscribe to my email newsletter. I'll push those updates out as soon as we keep going along here. But again, today's update is that the IMF has officially called for the end, essentially the end of the US dollar, a new reserve currency of the world, an entirely new system. With that, there's a lot to be said. What does that mean for Bitcoin? That means that life goes on, and if anything, now countries start to accumulate faster than ever. We've also seen PayPal this week. They've announced that they're going to be integrating it into their platform. So that's 350 million users that are going to have access to Bitcoin as of this week, next week, that haven't had access before. So this is great news, great information. It's looking great, y'all. Again, this might seem like a crazy time, but if you're paying attention to this information, if you're paying attention to what I'm putting out there, what others are talking about in this space, it's an amazing time to be alive, because there's never been more opportunity in the world than right now, right when we speak, even with all this chaos going on. So keep your head up, keep it sharp. I'm going to enjoy the rest of this awesome sunset here where I am. That's going to be it, y'all.